Today we're going to do some 18th century cooking. We have a squirrel here with some other ingredients that we'll run you through. I'm going to do this again on the hearth. So thanks for joining us. Let's go through it. So some knives. Obviously the squirrel, we get the heart there with it. We have some seasonings. We have salt and pepper, freshly cracked. We have some thyme, some nutmeg of course. We have a bay leaf. We have some sack, which is here. I don't really have sack. I don't have that. It's just a simple white wine. We have some apple cider vinegar and our pot that we're going to cook it in. We're also going to add some bacon lardons, as the squirrel really doesn't have any fat on it, so we're going to need that to help keep it moist as well, and it's obviously going to give it some good flavor, so that's what we're doing. So the first thing we need to do is cut up our squirrel into pieces. We have the heart here. I'll just cut that in half, get it in the pot. Now I'm not a butcher really, but I am a butcher's apprentice. I've been doing it for 2 years now. And I say 2 years, but the first year I kind of caught it at the end of the season. So really pretty solid for a year, and mostly on game. So deer, I've done a bunch of that. I helped out with a couple pigs as well, and a bear as well. So no expert by any means, but so you have the front shoulder area. On the back side, any beast is the same. So you get the back straps, what we like to call it over here in North America, that run along the spine. Again, same on every beast. It varies a little bit. Bear is a little bit different than every other beast that I've come across, but for the most part they're the same. You know, lamb, all that type of stuff is all the same. So this is actually come out of the freezer. We harvested this this past hunting season, late fall, early winter. So different ways you can do this. If you look inside, see these pieces of meat right here. There's 2 on each beast. Those are the actual tenderloins. Most people mistake or cross-reference or call the same thing the back strap the tenderloin, which is actually not the case. So inside the beast, under the spine, and towards the rear of the beast, you have the actual tenderloins, which is the best meat on any beast. So you could take those out with your knife, depending on the size of the beast, and have a meal just with that. This is a squirrel, so they're not so big. So we're going to leave them on. We're going to cut this up in a typical fashion like you would a lamb. So where the vent would be, you'd come up. Again, the vent comes up in such a fashion, and then you will want to get to the next joint in there and cut that straight across. You could certainly take the legs off and the seams this way first. We're not going to do that. We're going to go and guesstimate here, right about there. Straight across. So if this was venison or a deer, that would be your haunches. We're going to do the same thing just behind the shoulder. Again, there's different ways to do this. You see I missed this when I cleaned it out. This little bit right here under the armpit is actually a gland. So you definitely want to get rid of that, because it will make your meat taste foul. I'm going to check the other side, because there's 2, and that looks pretty good. So just behind the shoulder, we're going to do the same thing like we did with the haunches. And again, there's different techniques. You can count 4 ribs, you can count 6 ribs, depending on what you're cutting up for meat. But we'll not sure what rib that is, but we'll go again just behind the shoulder. So now we get the shoulders, the haunches. This would be your saddle, and you can separate that as well. You can you know, get your loin end, your best end, and cut that in half, and we're gonna do that just because how we're cooking this. So just behind that last rib there, we'll go in there. Our best end, our loin end, and maybe that looks familiar to you, just a little bit smaller obviously, or a lot of bit smaller. But on a lamb or any other beast, could be beef. Beef would be huge, but venison, you could do this as well. You got your 2 flaps here. Again, we have our actual tenderloins on the inside of that, hence the loin end. But you could cut those out. You could stuff and roll this up, tie it into a joint, and roast that off. Not sure how typical that was in the 18th century, but that's what that is. So we'll leave that big. This one, just because the ribs are a little further apart and it's a little bit wider, and we kind of want that to cook a little evenly, I'm going to cut that in half right along the spine. And get 2 pieces out of that. So there's your best end, your loin end that we'll keep. I'm going to do the same with the haunches and the shoulders. I'm just going to split those straight down the middle. So the rear haunches, and we have the shoulders, we'll do the same. And we end up with 6 decent pieces of meat here. Again, it's a squirrel, pretty small, so we're going to have to pick this meat off after it's cooked. But we'll get that in the pot along with those 2 pieces of heart that we already cut in half. So next, the bacon lardons. You know, smoked bacon, or you know, thicker cuts would have been more prevalent probably back in the time. I don't have that here. Or salt pork was another big one all across the frontier and in the 18th century, and even before and after that actually. Salt pork is still made today and loved by many, more so in the South, I'd imagine. But I just have some smoked streaky here. Again, we're going to cut up into lardons. This is about 5 pieces, I guess. So smaller pieces. We're going to break this up and add it to the pot. Again, because the squirrel doesn't have any fat of its own, that will help it cook and stay tender, if you will. So we'll add this as well, breaking it up a little bit as we add it to the pot. Alright, so we've got our meat contents in there. So we're going to add a little bit of nutmeg, and yeah, I have glass dishes here. Not sure that was prevalent in the 18th century, but that's what I have. I don't have any stoneware or anything like that, so that's what I'm using. So I'll add maybe a teaspoon of nutmeg, some fresh cracked black pepper, probably the same, half a teaspoon or so. Same with the salt. A little bit of thyme. I'm going to add 1 bay leaf to that. And then our, in the period, would have been sack is what they had. Very, very common. This is just a white wine is all it is. So we'll add that in there. Just about covers the meat. And then our vinegar, we'll add that as well. And from what I read, which wasn't a whole bunch, but even from my grandmother, which was not so long ago, she's since passed away, but she lived to 92, I believe it was. And she had all kinds of recipes that entailed, you know, marinating the meats. So in the time period, they probably would have marinated this, you know, for at least a couple, 3 days before they would cook it. We're not doing that, obviously. We're just going straight at it. But all this same stuff, maybe less the seasonings until you were about to cook it, would have been true in the period. Again, marinating the meat at least for a few days. So I think this is going to turn out really, really good. So let's get our lid on, get to the hearth, rake out some coals, and get cooking this. So our fire's died down nicely. We definitely got some hot coals under there, so we'll drag some of those out. It just so happens we have a little bit of an indent right there, so that should be perfect. I'm just going to rest this pot right on top of that, and if we need it to cook a little bit longer, we can rake some more coals out. Try to keep that handle up. Push coals back closer to it if I can. This would probably work very well in a Dutch oven as well. We know it as a Dutch oven. Back in the time period, that was a bake kettle is what they called it. And you can do a lot with those, obviously. Make breads, soups, stews, all kinds of things. So we're going to let this cook as long as possible. It's not really a stew per se, but squirrel can be pretty stringy meat. You know, we want that to break down as much as possible and get it as tender as we can. So we're going to let this cook for quite a while, and I will let you know exactly how long when it's done. Alright, it's been about an hour, so we're going to check that. Got my glove on, of course. I'm going to give it a mix up. Smells so good. So good. So that's an hour. We're going to keep that on. Again, we want that meat to be tender as possible. Squirrel's definitely stringy meat. So again, if we need to, we'll drag coals out of the fire to replenish that. But I think we're good with what we have right now. So one final stir before we bring it to the table. You can see the chimneys drafting quite well. So the time stamp on this has been 2¼ hours. it looks good, it smells phenomenal. So we're gonna bring this to the table and plate it up and have a taste. Let's have a go at it. It smells phenomenal. That bacon, again with my fingers, absolutely amazing. You can taste the layers of flavors there, from the wine to the nutmeg, just a hint of salt and pepper, but so profound and not something we're accustomed to today. So definitely different, but certainly good eats. So good. This reminds me of my family from Portugal and some of the recipes they had for marinating meat. And we didn't marinate this specifically, but you can taste that, you know, marinade in the flavor, and it's amazing. And again, just on the time of the cooking, squirrel again would be stringy meat, very tough if you spit roasted it or quick fried it in a pan. But where this has went for at least a couple hours, very, very tender and so delicious. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you on the next video. Take care.